All right, we're talking keto, the keto diet 101. First, we're going to talk about what the keto diet is. We're going to talk about what ketones are. Why are they important? And are they? What does the keto diet look like? Just from a foods perspective and a ratios perspective. We're going to talk about different variations on a keto diet, different approaches to it, and how to use it effectively and do it safely. And then again, how to get started. So, what is the keto diet? The textbook definition is that it's a diet that promotes the state of ketosis in the body through either fasting or dietary carbohydrate restriction. The state of ketosis is a metabolic state of increased ketone bodies in the blood. That's all it means. Ketone bodies are any one of three different metabolites that are produced as a byproduct of fat metabolism, otherwise known as fat burning, and used as an alternative energy source for the body. So, a little bit on the history of the ketogenic diet. Fasting has actually been used for therapeutic purposes since 500 BC, predominantly to treat epilepsy. Interesting, right? In the 1920s, the standard ketogenic diet was used to mimic the metabolic state of fasting to treat epilepsy with tremendous success. As a matter of fact, it was the primary protocol. But, then the pharmaceutical industry gets involved and came out with some anti seizure medications that the medical community and the pharmaceutical community could make money on. So using a free dietary approach didn't really compensate anybody. So the ketogenic diet fell by the wayside. But then we saw this resurgent in the 1990s. There was a famous Hollywood producer, Jim Abramson, whose son Charlie had epilepsy, but it was a drug resistant form. He was having these seizures that no medications could help. And when Jim went through the archives and did his own research, is when he found the ketogenic diet. And lo and behold, it was like magic. Suddenly, Charlie's seizures were dramatically reduced and stopped. And there was a Dateline special about it. And so this threw this back into the spotlight. Meanwhile, around that time, the Atkins diet became popular. It was introduced actually in the 1960s, but it was really the 1990s when it really sort of took off as a weight loss program. But it was developed by a cardiologist, a doctor by the name of Dr. Robert Atkins, who realized, gee, it's not fat and cholesterol consumption that was causing heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. It was actually this overabundance of carbohydrate in the diet. All right, so let's do a comparison. So if you were to just take a look at the food pyramid, the USDA food pyramid, and you were to just rank it by macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Essentially, this is what it would look like, that carbs are at the base of the pyramid. Now, that includes vegetables and fruits, but the recommended number of servings per day for grains is astronomical, 8 to 11. Holy cow, that's a huge carbohydrate load on a daily basis. Then you've got your sort of nod to protein in the middle, and then you have your fats at the top. Very little in general, right? So it's definitely biased towards a high carbohydrate, moderate protein, low fat diet. Now, the ketogenic diet, in comparison, really flips that completely on its head. Carbohydrates really should just be a small portion of your caloric intake on a daily basis. Protein, again, should be kind of towards the middle, but your fats are going to end up making up the majority of your calories. That doesn't necessarily mean by grams. It just means by calories. And that's because fats carry 9 calories per gram versus protein and carbohydrates at just 4. All right, so we're basically taking the conventional wisdom and the conventional recommendations and turning them upside down. So today, the ketogenic diet is used for
a number of purposes. Most commonly, with just the general public, is to promote fat loss, right? Through this quote unquote fat burning through the whole ketogenic process, and we'll explain that, and also for appetite control. It also helps you manage and improve many chronic metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, hypertension, as well as some experimental treatments now in treating certain cancers and dementia. It has also been used as a tool to manage and improve psychological and mental health conditions. Um, as a side note, many people know my husband Brad and know that he has suffered from clinical anxiety his entire life, as well as ADHD. I don't think it's not a big secret. He'll talk about that often, but he notices when he gets rid of sugar and manages his carbohydrate intake, his anxiety is noticeably better, significantly better. It also helps improve cognitive function and promotes neuroprotective benefits to the brain because the brain can burn ketones preferentially, actually, and it burns a lot cleaner. Okay, so there's actually two ways to get there. You can get there through fasting, which is just going longer between meals, maybe skipping an entire day. Some people like to do a couple of days every once in a while. I am not suggesting that. All right. While I don't know every single one of you intimately, but I'm going to venture to say most of you have never fasted before, and most of you are not fat adapted yet. And fasting would be a very, very uncomfortable and unnecessary way to get there. But fasting is how our ancestors got there because, unlike our current lifestyles, hunter gatherers oftentimes only ate once or twice a day because they spent a big chunk of the day going out to find their food, gather it, hunt it, what have you. What food they did bring out had to be shared amongst the rest of the tribe. And so it was very common that they maybe got 1-2 meals tops. So they just went much longer in between meals. So their bodies became very, very efficient at being able to utilize the energy they had at the time, store it for later in between meals, and then access what they needed when they needed it. Okay. I am not recommending using fasting for people until at some point you do become fat adapted and then you just find you're not hungry. That's the magic of how this diet works. It regulates your appetite and you just find you're not hungry. So you can naturally go longer between meals. And so you naturally start eating less and your brain is happy. It's got clean burning fuel that it can use. Your cognitive function goes up. It's wonderful. Now, you do not have to fast. Another way around this is through what we're calling nutritional ketosis rather than fasting ketosis. Nutritional ketosis just means from a nutritional perspective, we are sort of taking our way of eating, which is very low carbohydrate, only vegetables basically, moderate protein, and high fat. This is going to produce low enough blood sugar in the body that it prompts your liver to start producing ketones. So you do not have to be in a fasted state in order for your body to do this. You can do this nutritionally. You can eat a normal day's worth of food and still get into ketosis. So that's what we're going to focus on for the purpose of the rest of this presentation. Okay, so just briefly talking a little bit about fasting. Ketosis is a physiological response to fasting. Okay, this is an evolutionary adaptation. It was a normal part of the human experience. I touched on this earlier. When dietary glucose isn't readily available for energy needs, glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose, is depleted, as well as blood glucose, right? The body can break down muscle tissue to get it. Okay, that's a process called gluconeogenesis. Okay, that's why we want you to continue to eat moderate amounts of proteins so that you have those amino acids in your blood as well, and it can turn those amino acids into the glucose it needs instead of your own muscle. Now, once you're in ketosis and your body is actually producing ketones, that state of ketosis will spare your muscle tissue because those muscles and the brain can now use ketones for energy. It doesn't need that glucose anymore. Now, it takes about 48 hours for women and 72 hours for men to get into ketosis using just fasting. Okay? Now, nutritional ketosis. This actually mimics the blood glucose level seen when you're fasting without fasting, okay? Because we're just not going to be consuming any meaningful level of carbohydrates. For the most part, the only carbohydrates you're going to be consuming should be vegetables, because that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck nutritionally. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So here's what happens. You restrict dietary carbohydrates. This leads to a reduction in blood sugar or blood glucose. This prompts lower insulin in the body and higher levels of glucagon. Those are the two hormones, insulin being the one that stores, glucagon being the one that actually releases. Once the glycogen in your muscles, your organs, and your liver is depleted, then your liver starts producing ketones. It starts metabolizing stored fat to produce those ketones. And that fat and ketones get used for energy. And as long as you continue with this dietary carb restriction, then this process will remain intact. However, for most people, once you increase carb intake past your personal threshold, then that's going to break this cycle. And then you're going to have to work to get back into it again. So what are ketones exactly, and are they important? And my answer to that is going to be it depends on your goal. This is just a slide to show you that there are a couple different types of ketone bodies that are in your blood at any one time. These are all different byproducts of fat metabolism in the liver. That's all you need to know on this slide. So what are the benefits of ketones? First of all, it's an indication that your body is burning fat for energy, right? Ketones are not produced unless your body's burning fat. Ketones have also been shown to suppress hunger. This, for me, is the magic of the ketogenic diet for weight loss. Because I will tell you, you can be in a ketogenic diet and not lose weight. Because if you are still eating too much and you have too much just fatty acids floating around in your system because you're eating too much, your body's going to burn that first instead of the fat on your body. So the benefit of ketones suppressing hunger levels is you no longer have this urge to eat every few hours. You get fuller faster. You end up going longer between meals. All this feels very normal. It feels very normal. It's, for many people, it's kind of weird that they're just not hungry. So out of habit, sometimes people early on will continue to eat more than they really need. And then eventually they start thinking, gosh, I'm just not hungry. So you start naturally eating less. You just start naturally eating only what your body needs rather than any kind of surplus. And then weight starts to come off. So ketones are also a cleaner burning fuel for the body, particularly for the brain. Because when ketones are utilized, that does not produce free radicals or something called reactive oxygen species, like what happens when your body burns glucose. Ketones burn much cleaner. And it also promotes tremendous mental clarity because this type of fuel is so easy for the brain to use. There's a lot of promising research on using ketones to support the treatment for more neurological conditions than just epilepsy. This includes Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, depression, anxiety, and more. And there is also promising research that ketones may help cancer treatments by supporting the healthy cells while limiting fuel for cancer cells. Because here's what we know. Healthy cells can use either glucose or ketones. Cancer cells can only use glucose. They cannot use ketones. So the premise here is while you're undergoing cancer treatment, if you can maintain a ketogenic diet or have ketones in the body, those ketones can be there to continue to support and feed your healthy cells so they suffer less damage under a cancer treatment. And it weakens the cancer cells so that the cancer treatment that is being used is more productive on those cancer cells. So the bottom line, ketone production definitely has some very real benefits. But are ketones really required for fat loss? Okay, if I'm producing ketones, does it necessarily mean that I'm losing weight? So the short answer is no. And I alluded to why a little bit earlier. Okay, but it can make it easier. So let me explain. All right, let's talk about it. So ketones, again, are an indication that your body is using fat for energy. When the body has sufficient energy, your hunger signals are suppressed. Your appetite is naturally regulated to your actual energy needs, and you're less likely to overeat. When you are using stored body fat for energy efficiently, you can reduce caloric intake without feeling hungry. It's like you forgot to eat lunch, because you were just busy, you weren't hungry, and you went along your way. When hormone levels are balanced, mood improves, cravings are reduced, if not gone. You are less likely to eat for reasons other than hunger, just because mentally and psychologically you're in a better place. However, it's not ketosis per se that promotes fat loss. It's merely the metabolic status that's friendly to fat loss. So here's a few facts and a few myths busted. You can be in ketosis and still gain weight if you're overeating. Okay, I alluded to this already. Unless you are fat adapted, you can be producing ketones, but you may not be using them efficiently, which may continue this tendency to overeat. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. If you are eating too much and the body does not need to burn its own fat, this happens as well, right? So, when you are fat adapted, your cells have the metabolic machinery. And what it needs is sufficient healthy mitochondria. Those are the energy power plants of your cells in order to use ketones for energy. When you are fat adapted, your appetite regulates, you naturally eat less, you enter ketosis beautifully, your mental clarity improves, your mood improves, and you have this sustainable energy, effortless, ideal body composition. Okay, so for ketosis to be effective, you must be fat adapted. So you can be in ketosis but not be fat adapted because you don't have those mitochondria built yet. And you can be fat adapted but not be in ketosis. All fat adapted means is you have the metabolic machinery to burn fat when the conditions are right. But if you're under other conditions and you have enough glucose in your system, you have the machinery you need to burn through that as well. And to basically be metabolically flexible, be able to go from fat burning and glucose burning when you need it without any real undue noticeable differences in how you feel. That part takes a little while to build, which is why for many of you, I kind of recommend you start with primal and work towards being fat adapted, keeping your carbohydrates within a reasonable level, maybe around 100 grams. Get fat adapted first. Get used to your body relying on the fat that you're eating and what ketones it is producing, and let your body practice getting used to using it. Then go ahead and drop your carbohydrates down to 50 grams because that transition is going to be a lot easier. This is a quote from my boss, okay, the founder and best-selling author of The Primal Blueprint and the Keto Reset Diet. Fat adaptation is the normal, preferred metabolic state of the human animal. It's nothing special. It's just how we're meant to be. So, what exactly does it mean to be fat or keto adapted? All it really means is that your primary source of metabolic fuel is fatty acids or ketones rather than glucose. That's all that means. So, I want to compare and contrast what it means to be a sugar burner versus a fat burner. What do I mean by a sugar burner? Somebody who is reliant on dietary carbohydrates for their energy needs versus a fat burner who uses essentially fat, predominantly fat for their energy needs. And it comes from both the fat they eat, but also from the fat on their bodies. So let's take a look at the sugar burner. Your primary fuel source is glucose, both dietary and what's stored in your muscle cells and organs. So stored glycogen can really only hold about 2,000 calories of energy at any one time. This is why marathon runners and ultra marathon runners need to be sucking down those goo packs all the time, because there's only so many calories worth of glucose in their bodies at any one time. They have to constantly be refueling. So a sugar burner tends to feel hungry every few hours, tends to feel nauseous, tends to get snacky, likes to snack between meals. If you go too long between meals, you tend to feel lightheaded, you get that foggy brain feeling. Many people get irritable and just fixated on food, like I have to eat. Cravings and hormones tend to be what control your food choices for you. And unfortunately, we start to see accelerated aging due to these sort of dirty byproducts of glucose oxidation, these advanced glycation enzymes and free radicals. So let's contrast that with a fat burner. The primary fuel source, as I said, is fatty acids, both dietary and stored, and and ketones. The stored body fat, even on a relatively lean person, is about 100,000 calories. Again, this is on a lean person. That really, once you're well fat adapted and you're psychologically not dependent on food anymore, you can go all day really without feeling particularly hungry. Feelings of satiety, mental clarity, stable mood, and yeah, you get hungry, but not hangry. You control your food choices now because you don't have this constant devil on your shoulder telling you to eat more carbs, because that's not what your body is using for fuel anymore. And this tends to slow the aging process because the byproducts of burning fat are actually ketones. They're cleaner and does not produce advanced glycation enzymes or free radicals. All right, so 3 things need to happen in order to become fat adapted. Glucose needs to be removed as a fuel source. You have to produce enough ketones to reach the nutritional range. You want to be over 5 millimole per deciliter. And this range needs to be maintained long enough for your body to make the metabolic shift to be able to use fatty acids and ketones predominantly. Now, there are ways to measure where you are as it relates to ketones. The best way to do this is through blood test strips. That's going to be the most accurate. They do sell urine strips. They're very cheap urine strips. So this will give you an indication that your body is producing ketones. So it can be a helpful tool to buy. The problem though is it doesn't really tell you what's in your blood. It doesn't tell you what you're using. It just lets you know that you're producing it and pissing it out. So just because you pee on a ketone strip and it's bright dark purple, which is an indicator that you've got a lot of ketones in your pee. So you're producing them, you're peeing them out, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're using it. Okay. And we often find people that have been in ketosis for a while, right? People that are exceptional fat burners will often, those pee strips won't work anymore because they only produce the amount of ketones they need. They don't overproduce it anymore. Their body is efficient at using it. So you don't pee it out anymore. So just a side note, but for folks kind of just getting started, it is kind of a helpful tool just to find out if your body's making them or not. But the blood ketone monitors are a much better tool, but they are more expensive. Okay, the strips are more expensive. I have a company that I use that's a little less, but they're still not cheap, but it is a better deal. So if you have an interest in learning more about that, just let me know in the Facebook group or message me. So that's one way to know if you're in ketosis officially, but you can tell if you're in ketosis anecdotally just by whether all those symptoms that I told you, mental clarity, brain fog's gone, you don't feel hungry, you can go longer between meals, you wake up in the morning, you're not hungry. All those things are indications that you're likely, at the very least, in a mild state of ketosis. So step 1, you have got to ditch the excess carbs. We're going to do this whether you're choosing keto or not, right? We're going to ditch the excess nutritionally unnecessary carbohydrates. So what are those? First of all, what are carbohydrates? So carbohydrates is any large group of organic compounds that occurs in food and living tissues that are predominantly sugars, starch, and cellulose. Okay, so if it's starchy or sugary, it's a carb. Okay, now vegetables are also carbs, but the ones we want to avoid are the ones that are exceptionally starchy and sugary. So the types of carbs that do more harm than good are the things like the breads, the potato chips, the crackers, the candy, granola bars, pastries, cupcakes, cakes, pasta is another big one, even oatmeal. Really, I mean, I know it's been touted as a health food, and I guess, compared to some other choices, it could be better, but for the purpose of this, it's really not. You want to stay away from that. But some other sneaky things is things like yogurt and milk. Any low fat dairy is off limits because it removes all the healthy fat. And what it ends up doing is calorie per calorie, you end up with a higher level of sugar. The lactose in there will throw you out of ketosis. And many of the low fat yogurts on the market are sweetened and have extra sugar in them. Don't want it. Okay. So we want to get rid of these guys. Certainly any sweetened drinks. That's the other thing. Like, why drink your calories? And I know I'm going to get a question, so I might as well answer it now about artificially sweetened beverages or beverages that are sweetened, like Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi. We talked about this in kind of the primal chapter, but I really, really do not want you guys drinking beverages that are sweetened with aspartame, sucralose, any of those artificial sweeteners. If you absolutely have to, there's a brand on the market you can buy at health food stores. You can even buy it on Amazon. The brand is called Zevia, Zevia. It's sweetened with stevia. So if you have to have something that is sweet and is reminiscent of soda once in a while, that's the one I would tell you to use. But other than that, even just a sparkling water that is naturally flavored, like LaCroix would be a great example. It's not sweet, but it is fizzy. You can throw some lemon or some lime in there. You can even buy the ones that are naturally flavored. They're just not sweetened. Those are fine too. Okay. And also certain fruits. Most fruits, with the exception of berries, are going to be off limits for a while because they deliver quite a big load of sugar when you eat them. So just for now, if you want to be in ketosis, you want to avoid it. Okay, so carbs that do more good than harm. The big one, veggies. What I call above the ground vegetables. Vegetables that grow above the ground, because typically the vegetables that grow below the ground, it's not that they're not good for you. There's the starchy ones, right? When they grow below the ground, it's because they're a root, right? Or a tuber. So I guess technically carrots fall in that realm, but for whatever reason, they're not quite as starchy as things like sweet potatoes, rutabagas, turnips, parsnips, things like that. But we want an abundance of green or just colorful veggies in general. And then in moderation, you can have some nuts. My favorites are macadamia nuts. They just have a better fatty acid profile and some of the fewest carbohydrates. But as long as you're keeping it to a handful of nuts at a time and you're not eating an entire bag, you're probably fine. One trick I use for this is to try to avoid sitting down with a bag of roasted salted nuts, because I can go through those like a champ, versus if I sit down with a bag of raw nuts, I'm more likely just to eat the handful or just eat till I'm not hungry anymore and put those away. And then on the limit side, once in a while, if you feel the need for some sort of starchy carb, you're fine. And even berries, unsweetened berries. So fresh blueberries, fresh blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, a reasonable portion size of that is probably fine. But what I'm going to tell you in the purpose of this, in order to be in ketosis and to get started, you're going to have to track this stuff. Okay, so if you're finding that by adding fruit or tubers into your diet is throwing you over that 50-gram mark, then you just need to eliminate them for now. All right? Okay, so keto rules of thumb. Low carb. We are looking at about 50 grams or less of carbohydrates. So it's going to be predominantly those veggies, in moderation some nuts, and in limited amounts starchy veggies and fruit. All right, so let's take a look at the moderate side of the equation, protein, especially for those of you that are here at the gym and CrossFitting. So if you're not, it's going to depend on how active you are, but you're going to want to stick to about 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. That's a good starting place for most people. If you are local to our gym, meaning, you were certainly within driving distance, then chances are you got an in-body scan, and on your in-body scan, it gives you your lean mass. So we can calculate this for you. If you're even less active, like you barely move, you can actually get by with even less than that 0.7. You can certainly get by with about 0.5. Okay. So why moderate protein? I thought protein was good for you. So yeah, protein is, but in super high amounts, like that Dukin diet. So I had somebody talk to me about the Dukin diet, which is almost all protein, which I think short term might be fine, but if you eat tremendously high levels of protein every day, that can actually be very toxic to your body. You have to piss it out, and it becomes pretty hard on your kidneys. So, but for the purpose of keto, in addition to this, first of all, you only need so much, right? You have a limit. So, but protein is also insulinogenic. Okay, it will raise insulin levels, though to a lesser degree than carbs. And it will in particular raise insulin levels when you eat too much of it. Okay, again, excess protein will be converted to glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. You heard me mention that before. Like anything else, the benefit and the detriment of anything is always in the dose, right? So we're just going to keep it moderate. We want it enough to be able to support lean mass and recovery. Anything more than that is a waste of money and a waste of food. So your body needs to do something with the excess protein, and these processes can cause other health concerns, as I mentioned before. So the rule of thumb for protein, somewhere between 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. All right, so step 3, healthy fats. Eat enough healthy fats to feel satiated. Healthy fats provide longer lasting energy. They make food taste really good. They keep you fuller longer. They regulate your appetite. They support healthy brain function. Your brain needs fat. And by the way, your brain and your body need cholesterol. And when we're not eating it, it can really cause some pretty dire results. The good news is your body will produce its own cholesterol. We'll talk about this in another presentation, right? Another lesson, but your body, your brain, you need fat because it supports cellular function and integrity, and it's the carrier of fat soluble vitamins. This is what kills me when I see people that sit down to like a glass of fat-free milk, skim milk, thinking they're getting their vitamin D. No, vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So you might be drinking vitamin D, but your body's not using it because it needs the fat in order to assimilate it. Okay, so this is just a few of the reasons why you need to eat enough fat. Okay, good fats versus bad fats. I'm going to go into a much deeper dive on helping you understand fats in another lesson. So I'm going to be relatively quick on this slide, but please know you're going to get much more detail into this. I believe it's lesson 3. Okay, but for the purpose of knowing whether you want to get started on a keto diet or getting it done right, I want you to focus on the good fats. And the good fats are the saturated fats that come from a healthy place. So this is butter, coconut oil, lard, tallow. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature, okay? And monounsaturated fats. So these are the fats that come in oil form at room temperature, but if you put them in the fridge, they tend to get cloudy and thicker. That's olive oil, avocado oil, macadamia nut oil. And the only polyunsaturated fats I really want you to go out of your way to consume is omega-3 fats. That's a form of polyunsaturated fats. Omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory. Everything else we're going to try to avoid, and I will get into why in another lesson, but this includes all trans fats. So you will know something has trans fats in it if on the label it has the term partially hydrogenated. Put it down, walk away, you don't want to touch it. But then things like soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, grapeseed oil, most shortenings, right? Anything that says hydrogenated, you want to avoid all these. These are most commonly found in restaurants, in fast foods, and processed foods, which is why what we want you focusing on are whole, natural foods, and our hope is to get you much more comfortable cooking at home. Okay, so here we go. We're tying this all together. So the keto rules of thumb, again, 50 grams or less of carbohydrates. We'll figure out your protein, 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, and then enough fats to feel satiated. So let's talk a little bit about what a keto meal is, right? So we know keto meals are low in carbs, mostly veggies, moderate in protein, and high in healthy fats. So if I go out to a restaurant, I will often zero in. I immediately just sort of go and look for a Cobb salad because a Cobb salad embodies this. It's a lot of veggies, a lot of lettuce actually, but it's got avocado, which is almost all fat. It typically has some sort of cheese. So if you can tolerate dairy, that's a little bit of protein, mostly fat. It usually has chicken. It usually has bacon. Again, a little bit of protein, a lot of fat. It usually has egg. Again, a little bit of protein, a lot of fat. And then it's got, tomatoes and other veggies. The only problem with eating a Cobb salad in a restaurant is the salad dressing, because I promise you the salad dressing, unless it's homemade, right? Unless they make it from scratch in the kitchen and they're using olive oil, chances are it's made with canola oil or sunflower, safflower oil. So what I will often do in a restaurant is just ask them to bring me olive oil and vinegar, and I will just dress my salad with olive oil and vinegar and a little salt and pepper, and it's just delicious. But let's talk about how to make other keto meals. So this is pretty simple. You don't need to overthink it. And especially in the beginning, it's all about some sort of protein, whatever you enjoy, plus a big hunk of whatever vegetables you love most, cooked in some sort of healthy fat. Okay, so sometimes I use butter. Sometimes I use reserved bacon fat. I will render that down. I will put it in the fridge after I've made some bacon, and then I take that out and I will cook my veggies in it. It's absolutely delicious. So some sort of healthy fat. Coconut oil works fine too. Even, like I said, as long as it's not super, super high heat, like a high heat saute, you don't want to use olive oil. But if it's a lower heat, that's fine. And avocado oil actually has a much higher smoke point. Avocado oil seems to be pretty safe to cook. And then whatever herbs and spices like taste good to you. So I have some pictures on here. I've got bacon and eggs for breakfast. I've got some yummy, yummy meatballs. I don't know. I'm going to see if I can find it for you, but I found these chicken, like almost like a Mexican flavor, like chicken meatballs that you dip in guacamole. Oh my gosh, they're so good. Frittata would be great for breakfast. Again, another salad, bacon wrapped scallops, deviled eggs. I make a huge batch at the beginning of every week. I take an entire dozen eggs, hard boil them, cut them open, and make a big batch of deviled eggs, and that can be for breakfast or snacks. Some sort of steak with veggies, a beautiful piece of salmon over a bed of veggies. Looks like a pork tenderloin there with a bunch of green beans. I mean, look at this sausage and peppers, the Italian in me. So, I mean, all of these meals would be a beautiful keto meal. Okay, so have fun with it. Now, that said, there is more than one way to do this keto diet thing, okay? And so for many of you going this road, I'm going to tell you, you got to start with the standard approach. You have to build the metabolic machinery, as what we call it. You have to build the mitochondria and train the mitochondria to use ketones. So the standard approach is that consistent lifestyle of low carbohydrate, 50 grams or less, moderate protein, high fat with rare deviations. Okay, this is best for folks who are starting out with a low carbohydrate tolerance in general, and you're using keto as a treatment protocol for something. Now there's another approach called the cyclical keto diet. So this is where carbs are just cycled in occasionally, right? That maybe most of your week you spend in a low carb, moderate protein, high fat approach, and only punctuate carbohydrates in every so many days. And this is going to be variable for everybody. Most women can probably get away with it once a week, depending on your activity level. So there's a big caveat there. Whereas some men might need to do it every 5 days, something like that, where you're low, you're ketogenic, and then every 5 days or once a week, and again, this is not meant to be a huge carb binge. What I'm talking about is adding a sweet potato or going out for sushi one night, something like that. Okay. This is best for those who've achieved fat adaptation and can have a high carb day or a high carb meal without completely disrupting your long-term strategy. Now, it will take you a couple of days to get back into ketosis when that happens, but that's normal. It doesn't mean that you're not still losing weight. It doesn't mean you're not still burning fat, but you've lost that ketosis and it's going to take you a couple days to get back into it. Then there's something called a targeted keto diet. This is ideal for highly active people and for high level athletes. This is where your carbs are eaten strategically around your workouts, and it's strictly to replace glycogen, and it's very dose dependent. So this means this can be some sort of post workout shake that has carbohydrates in it. It could just be that for some people, they feel better having some sort of either carb or like some sort of starchy veggie or fruit either before a workout within 30 minutes, 30 minutes, hour-ish, right? And then you're going to exercise and work that off. Other people don't really like that. They want to continue that fat burning state and eat their carbs afterwards. So the thought process there is, if you know you're going into a really high intensity workout, and you know you're not going to be burning fat anyway, you're going to be burning glucose because it's a high intensity workout, then go ahead and use some sort of carb right before your workout so that you burn it off. Now, this is going to require some experimentation because everybody's a little bit different as to how much carbohydrate they're going to burn through, right? So you got to be careful there. Then there's the other side of the coin, which is I'm going to finish up my workout. Chances are I depleted the glycogen in my muscles. So I'm just going to eat enough carbohydrates after my workout to refill that glycogen. So that's the way that approach works. Now you've got another option, this high protein keto diet. So this is just a higher protein consumption than the one we normally advocate. Okay, so this can be helpful for particularly heavy people starting out. The extra protein really does help knock out hunger, particularly in the early stages. And then at that point, then you can transition into the standard approach. But if you find at the start of the keto diet that you are hungry all the time, that tells me you're not fat adapted yet. So maybe you need to step back and take in a few more carbs, or in lieu of carbs, you take in more protein. Okay, and then we'll sort of tailor you down because again, we talked about there are some dangers in over consuming protein on a regular basis for long term. And then there's the restricted keto diet. This also restricts calories. Okay, so this is to produce maximum ketone production. And this is typically used for treating neurological disorders and cancer. So this is where what we're really looking for is a high level of ketone bodies. I can't think of anybody in this group that would need something like that. Okay, so all of the variations of the standard diet, the standard sort of keto diet, these are 2.0 strategies. These are for after you've gone through your traditional period of maybe primal first and then got into a traditional keto approach and now you're trying some of these other options. All right? All right, so who should not go full keto? Pregnant women and breastfeeding women. If you're pregnant and breastfeeding and you're looking to give this a try, this is not the time. That's not to say you need to be high carb. I'm saying you want to stick with a primal approach. Breastfeeding women may find they need more than even 100 grams and they can tolerate 150 or 200 because they need more calories. They need more fuel to produce milk. High level athletes before the competitive season. All right, so do not do this in the middle of your competitive season. Wait for your off season where you can let your body transition. Growing children, right? So growing children don't need to be keto. I mean, they can be perfectly fine on a traditional primal approach at 150 grams of carbohydrates or something like that. I wouldn't be counting your children's carbs. Unless we're treating epilepsy, cancer, or you have a child who is really overweight, that clearly this child has a low tolerance for carbohydrates. And if we're not careful, we are seeing more and more children having type 2 diabetes and being treated for type 2 diabetes. That's a different story. But most children are going to be completely fine at around 150 grams of carbohydrates. Anorexics who tend toward severe undereating already, this will just be your excuse to continue to eat less. So we would want to keep an eye on that. People with rare metabolic disorders. So if you have one of these rare metabolic disorders, you probably know, and so talk to Hector and I first. Folks with any kind of pancreatic insufficiency, all right, that leads to impaired enzyme production, you need to kind of have that treated first. Doesn't mean you can't ever get the benefits of keto, but we just want to make sure that that's taken care of first. All right. Folks who should be cautious, right? This does not mean that you can't try keto. It just means we might have to take some extra steps for you. These are people with gallbladder dysfunction or have had it removed. These folks will need to supplement with ox bile and certainly some lipase, as well as maybe some other enzymes. People with a history of kidney stones, you are going to need to drink lots and lots of water and increase your dietary intake of potassium or other supplements. People who are naturally lean need to make sure that you're consuming enough calories so that you don't lose more weight. All right, so some temporary side effects. So when people go from standard American diet to keto, we start to see some symptoms, I guess, of this metabolic shift happening. Okay, so in the short term, you may find some fatigue. Okay, it's because your body is transitioning fuel sources. If you have a body who has been dependent on glucose pretty much its whole life, and then suddenly we're going to tell it, all right, now I want you to start using mostly fat, that doesn't happen overnight. Okay, and it can take just a few days to up to 3 or 4 weeks. So just be prepared for this to happen. If you're having a really hard time for longer than a few days, reach out to Hector and I, and we'll talk about ways to troubleshoot that. Bad breath can happen. Okay, so here's what's happening. When you go too low carb too fast and your body doesn't have the metabolic machinery to use it, remember I was telling you that you actually just pee it out? Well, you can also breathe it out. Okay, acetone, which is one of those ketone bodies that was on that slide, comes out through your breath. Don't worry, it goes away. Okay, it does not it's not there all the time. It's only there while your body is transitioning. Okay, so whatever, chew some gum, make sure you've got some mouthwash, rinse your mouth out with coconut oil. That will help too, believe it or not. Coconut oil is a natural, like, antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, anti-everything. So it really cleans the mouth really nicely. You might find that you pee a lot, okay? Because as you deplete glycogen, as your glycogen gets used, you're going to lose water with it. And insulin levels are going to drop, and so with it will go some sodium. So all this is secreted out through your urine. So we recommend everybody on keto to add extra sea salt and supplement with some electrolytes, because you might also start to feel muscle twitches or get kind of restless leg syndrome or muscle cramps. All that's really an indication of is you need more electrolytes. So add some potassium, magnesium. There's lots of different options, both in normal grocery stores as well as health food stores for that. You might notice some digestive changes, and this is common with any change in diet. For some, your digestion will actually just improve. It'll get better. But for others, we might see some changes that make you feel uncomfortable. This is typically temporary. I mean, if you've gone decades without really eating vegetables on a regular basis and you've been feeding your body nothing but processed carbohydrates, those are very easy to digest. The body doesn't need to do much with it, so it gets processed pretty quickly, goes straight to the blood. But now we're working with mostly veggies, so there's a lot of fiber and a lot of cellulose that your body needs to break down. So you're going to notice some digestive changes. These will typically improve over time, but for some of you, you may have other circumstances where we need to talk about other digestive aids, like adding in some enzymes. That can really, really help. Adding in some probiotics can really help, and a couple of other things. You may notice pretty severe sugar cravings in the beginning because your brain is going to be like, what the heck are you doing to me? Right? Switching fuel sources like that can trigger cravings in the beginning. This will go away, but what I'm going to tell you is when those cravings kick in, I want you to find something else that you can nosh on, something else you really enjoy that feels decadent. Most people, when these cravings, this is your period of time where you actually kind of overeat a little bit. That's fine. Okay. Eat extra portions at your meals. Have high fat, low carb snacks on hand, things like hard boiled eggs, meat sticks, macadamia nuts, or any other type of nuts. Those are big ones as well. Okay. And find a way to treat yourself with something other than food. I don't know about you ladies that might be in this group. I love a good bubble bath or go get my nails done. Guys, maybe go pick up a basketball game, do something with your butt, whatever it is, something that feels decadent to you that has nothing to do with food. All right. One that's interesting, I have never actually witnessed this, but I saw this in a forum. It was hair loss. Okay. Again, this can be common with any dietary change. And again, it's going to stop the minute your body adjusts to the ketones. And by the way, these side effects are not necessarily true of all people. Many people may actually find the opposite. Okay, so how to transition safely and successfully. First of all, be prepared. You have to have the right foods on hand. Go shopping, throw out all the high carb trigger foods, get rid of it. Either that or put it in a place where you just don't see it. Choose high quality foods over low quality foods. Okay, opt for whole foods over any of the low carb processed junk foods. They really aren't good for you. Yes, they're low in carbs, but they're just not good for you. You're not nourishing your body. Gradually reduce carbs. Okay, so for most of you, I'm going to recommend you start at 100 grams for your first couple weeks and then sort of wean yourself down to those 50. I would love for you to keep a journal to catalog how you feel and what foods you're eating. This will really tell us what works well for you and what you respond well to. The other thing is you're going to need to adjust your other lifestyle as well. Manage your activity in the first couple of weeks of this transition. Certainly the first week, I would opt for more sort of low level movement. These are fat burning movements that's going to cause your body to want to burn fat and circling to mostly strength type workouts. And if you are members of the gym and you are coming in, I'm not saying you can't come in, but rather than shooting for a sub 3 minute Fran like Brad, like whatever your normal like PR for Fran is, go slower. Intentionally go slower and keep the intensity down a little bit so you don't really just walk out of that gym feeling like, holy cow, I feel like garbage. Don't do that to yourself. All right. So to give yourself a little bit of a break, let your body transition. Be prepared to make this a lifestyle change, please, and adopt. You want your adapt to what your body needs. Okay. So if you're finding that through how you feel, you don't really need to be below 70 grams of carbohydrate or whatever, then that's completely fine. The last thing I want is for people using this 6 week challenge as some sort of short term fix, because I will tell you, everybody knows no short term fix works long term. I don't care whether you're referring to diet or anything else. Nothing that's done with a short term mindset ever holds true long term. And sometimes you want it that way, right? Sometimes things change, you want it that way. I don't know anybody in this group that's going to want to see a reversal of all the good they just did these first 6 weeks. All right, so let's just dive into a few frequently asked questions. How long does it typically take to get into ketosis? This is going to vary for everyone. For some people, it's really just a matter of a couple of days, certainly within the first week. For others are going to feel like they are dragging for about 3 weeks. Okay, it really can take a full 3 or 4 weeks. But this is going to vary for everyone. The thing that's going to help you in this process is making sure that you are eating enough so that you don't feel hungry. Okay, how do I know when I'm in ketosis? So all those things that we mentioned earlier, unless you're testing, which if you want to test, let me know. I'll let you know where to go to find the stuff to do that. But otherwise, if you find you wake up in the morning and you're just not hungry for breakfast, if you find that you ate lunch, dinner rolls around, and you're just really not that hungry, right? If you find that you can skip a meal and feel fine, that's a good indicator too. Another, you notice the fog lifts from your brain, where in the past around 3 o'clock in the afternoon you would like hit this energy slump and it's just not there anymore and your brain is just mentally really clear and alert. That's another great indicator. The other indicator is that your energy levels are super stable all day long and you tend to sleep better. Okay, so if you're finding these things to be true, then those are just anecdotal pieces of evidence that you're in ketosis. Okay. If I eat too many carbs, how long will it take to get back into ketosis? This is also individual, and it also depends on your past experience. So for people that are new to this, and they haven't been fat adapted for very long, it will take you longer to get back into it than somebody who has been fat adapted for a while and has the metabolic machinery. And it's really just a matter of a couple of days. Some things you can do to get back into it faster would be some pretty intense workouts. Burn through those carbs, burn through that glycogen that's in your muscles, get rid of it so that your body starts producing ketones again. Another thing is to skip a meal, fast for a little bit longer the next day, or do both. Fast for a little bit longer the next day and get in a pretty high intensity workout. It might not feel real comfortable, but it'll get you back into ketosis faster. What are exogenous ketones, and do they really help burn fat? So, exogenous ketones are a supplement that has hit the market. And I'm not even going to pretend to know how they're made, but you can actually ingest ketone salts. Okay. Somebody found a way to put these things in a bottle or in a canister. They taste terrible. They're getting a little bit better. I mean, I've tested a couple of them just for fits and giggles, but you can actually ingest these ketones. Do they help you burn fat? No, they don't. All they're doing is giving your body ketones to run on. But they are not teaching your body how to use ketones, and they're not giving your body and telling your liver to produce ketones. You're not burning fat. You're in ketosis because all ketosis means is that you have elevated levels of ketones in your blood. So technically you're in ketosis because you have high levels of ketones in your blood, but you didn't get there by burning fat. Okay? Where exogenous ketones can be helpful might be in two places. I have seen people use it to try to overcome some of these short-term symptoms that low carb flu some people tend to get. Taking an exogenous ketone once in a while when you need to, because you just really need to be on your game and you can't afford to be sluggish. Just bear in mind when you do that, you may find that it takes you longer to finally hit ketosis than other people. The other place I see it really helpful is in athletic performance, right? Where you're a ketogenic athlete and you're going to have a competition day, let's say, and you want to be on your game and literally have extra ketones to burn. I've also seen people use them when they need a particularly sharp mental day. They got a lot going on. They are going to need to remain focused. They'll use exogenous ketones for that. Okay. And do I need to be in ketosis to reach my goals? And the answer to that is no. All right. Many of you will find you have the fat loss you're looking for without ever getting there. Now, that doesn't mean there's not other benefits of being in ketosis. And I do kind of feel like everybody should try it at least once and see what it feels like. But no, you do not need to be in ketosis to reach your goals, depending on what that goal is. And we're going to spend some time throughout the course of this 6 weeks talking more and more about those goals. And so here's a couple additional resources. Here are a bunch of books that I highly recommend. I know Hector highly recommends them, that if you want to further your education are a great place to start. The Keto Reset Diet by Mark Sisson, Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living, and The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance, both by Drs. Finney and Volek, The Keto Diet by Leanne Vogel, Keto Clarity by Jimmy Moore, Living Low Carb by Johnny Bowden, Fat Chance by Dr. Robert Lustig, and Primal Fat Burner by Nora Gedgaudas. That's just a few. Believe me, there's more. Podcasts that I enjoy listening to when it comes to ketosis: Livin' La Vida Low Carb and Keto Talk by Jimmy Moore, Low Carb Conversations by Leah Williamson and Kara Halderman, Keto for Women Show, Sean Miner, she's pretty cool, The Fat Burning Man Show, Abel James, The Keto Evangelist by Brian Williamson, The Ketogenic Athlete Podcast, also by Brian Williamson, and The Keto Diet Podcast by Leanne Vogel. And there's a few great blogs, okay? The Diet Doctor, Dr. Andreas Enfeld, The Keto Evangelist, again, Brian Williamson, Ruled.me, Craig Clark, Healthful Pursuit, Leanne Vogel, Keto Adapted, Maria Emmerich, Mark's Daily Apple, again, Mark Sisson, and Grass Fed Girl, Caitlin Weeks. That's just a few. All right, so you've got these additional resources at your disposal. Don't forget, you've got additional resources in myself and Hector. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this aided in your decision as to whether you wanted to take a keto track or not. And also know that you don't have to make that choice in the beginning. You can start out the first 3 or 4 weeks and decide to give this a try later. All right.